Hello, good evening, everyone, to all the participants who are attending our third series of Enterprise Wednesday. Enterprise Wednesday is an event that is organized on alternate Wednesdays, second and the fourth week of Wednesdays, by Enterprise at Asia Pacific University. The purpose of Enterprise Wednesday is basically to sensitize aspiring entrepreneurs by hearing the stories of experienced entrepreneurs who have gone out and done what they do best, which is to create ventures. We would like the students and participants and also those viewers to hear the stories and actually weave out the key lessons on how expert entrepreneurs actually build their ventures. Today we have an amazing guest, Mr. Ramachandran Muniandy. Before telling you about him, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Vinesh, our Deputy Vice Chancellor from Asia Pacific University, to say a few words. Prof, over to you.
Right. Thank you, Dash, and a very good evening to one and all who are online. It's yet another Fire Chat Day on a Wednesday, and nothing better than to have a fire chat on a Wednesday with Dash and our a very distinguished guest here, Mr. Ramachandran. I want to thank you for coming on board on behalf of APU and student and staff. It's always great pleasure that we have a very prominent person from the industry who has done it all in terms of the journey from creating and ideating a product to what you have done with Asia Mobiliti to this date. And we are proud of you. And likewise, we are happy and very lucky to have you on board this evening so that you can share your experience with our students and staff members. Enterprise Wednesday, this is our third session and it's been such a successful venture that we have done since its inception about a month ago. And Dash, our entrepreneur in residence, together with our team of Project Enterprise members, have put together this Wednesday sessions, the Enterprise Wednesday sessions, in terms of a fire chat that allows our students to see and learn from the people and the individuals who have done it all successfully. So again, in advance, I want to thank you, Mr. Ramachandran. Thank you, Dash, for being involved this Wednesday today. And over back to you, Dash, because I know your fire chat will always be as fiery as it gets on a Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much. Looking forward to speak to you, Ram. Paul Romer, the economist at Stanford, once said, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And here's a man who's converted a crisis that you all face, in traffic or whatever, and he's turned it into an opportunity. Today's topic is pursuing the problem, worth solving. Ramachandran is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Asian Mobiliti, a mobility tech startup with a mission to improve transportation and mobility in Southeast Asia. I mean, his startup is born regional already from inception. Ram has his hands in various technology companies prior to starting his own organization. He's been in a high-tech industry all along. Let's hear from Ram. Ram, just tell us your story, your exciting story before you took the plunge into becoming the startup entrepreneur, with a family, and all that. People have this preconception that 20-year-old or 22-year-old entrepreneur, but we all have heard that's a myth, and they say that there are a few exceptions to 25-year-olds creating successful companies, but we have a lot of evidence and research coming from all over to say the midlife. I know you're younger than midlife. The entrepreneur who's with a lot of experience usually has a greater affinity to create successful startups. Tell us about your journey.
Well, thank you, Dash, once again for having me on your show. It's definitely good honor for me to do this, to share my journey. It is still a journey in progress. We are still building, we are still developing, but we have already embarked on it in terms of that aim that you mentioned earlier, that mission in order to improve transportation. How can we move people about and move goods about in smarter, more intelligent ways across our cities? And yes, you're right. We are very much a Malaysian startup with regional ambitions. We have always felt that there's no better place to build than in Malaysia. But we are not building just for Malaysia's sake. We are building in Malaysia so that the rest of the region gets to benefit. And we feel that being in Malaysia has always had huge opportunities, huge advantages, while it has its own challenges, no doubt about it. We all are very much aware of the challenges being in Malaysia. But with every challenge, that is where an entrepreneur is born, So this should be a land of entrepreneurs, simply because we are filled with challenges, and the challenges should all present an opportunity for a solution, for a business, for an enterprise, for a venture. And that is why we are very much proud of being in Malaysia, solving this problem. And so I must thank you again for coining what I think is a brilliant, brilliant title, Pursuing the Problem Worth Solving. And so let me use that to frame what we're doing, right? The problem here that led to the founding of Asian Mobility is the problem of transportation, the traffic, the sheer difficulty in moving about our city in the most efficient way, right? And the problems that traffic brings, the sheer inefficiency of being stuck in traffic jams, and the high cost of moving about our city in our own private vehicles. That is the problem. And the problem also then is with why are our public transportation systems really not serving our needs? Why is it they're not serving our needs? And so that's the large problem, right? That's the big problem. How do we make this better? How can we help people move about in safer ways, in more cost-effective ways, and in a more sustainable way, right? So it's not just about now, it's about how can we make this into a defining feature of our lifestyles, that our cities that we live in is not known for its traffic jams anymore, right? How do we change that? How do we change the fact that it takes me 2 hours to get to work on a Monday morning, on a Friday morning, and it's a perpetual problem, right? How do we change that so that our lives are not defined by such characteristics anymore? Because those are not sustainable, healthy ways of living. And so that's the big problem. And as a nation, we have always grappled with it. It's not a new problem. It's an ongoing problem, and it's a problem that never seems to go away. And then when you look out beyond Malaysia, you see actually a lot of developing countries are facing very similar problems. Very large urban migration, a lot of people moving into the city, and therefore the city is getting more crowded. We don't just have large cities here in Southeast Asia. They are metropolises. They are huge cities with more than 5 million population, and you've got a number of them across Southeast Asia. And along with that, high cost of travel, high cost of mobility. A lot of people, for you to travel safely, reliably, you need to own your own vehicle, be it either a private vehicle, car, or a motorbike. And in cities where we feel that motorbikes can solve the problem, you've got another problem with that as well. And then you also have, at the same time, huge investments being made by governments into public transport systems. And that means taxpayer dollars are being used towards building public transportation system that lesser and lesser people are using, right? So there's something that's not really working out here. Seems like a mismatch of resources of a country, right? We need to be able to find a good fit here. Can we put more dollars into play, but can we also get more people to benefit out of it? So that's the big problem to solve. But then we realized that who is actually solving it? Right? We realized that governments have tried to solve it to not much success, unfortunately. And in fact, they have kind of, with the government's method of trying to solve the problem, it is actually not helping us, simply because a lot more money is being used to build railway networks, to put buses on the streets, which really no one is using. And then we realize actually the solution may be misguided, right? A different solution is required to the problem. And so how me and my co-founder decided to pursue this problem, and to solve it, is using technology and data. And we realized that that is an angle, and that is a solution which is required in this day and age. So that is how the whole idea of Asia Mobility came about. And so if I were to backtrack a little bit, a bit of a background as to how we got there, we founded the startup in late 2018, so which is not too long ago. We are coming up to our 3rd year anniversary. But really, me and Premesh, the co-founder of Asia Mobility, both of us reconnected. We have been friends for a while, till then. We were neighbors, in fact, living in the same neighborhood for a few years. But in 2018, with the change that came upon Malaysia, both of us felt energized to do something new. And, we all felt that, we could do something and bring about change. In fact, that is what the change happened in 2018 that caused us a lot of us across the spectrum. Many Malaysians felt back then that we could actually do something and fix things here and see actual results. And so that inspired me and Prem to start looking at this problem here. But before that, what caused us to look at this? So let me just go a bit of a background there. I was a trained software engineer, and I grew up in Malaysia back then, so my age is going to be known here if I give some time frames. But back in the late 90s is when I graduated high school and started going to college and university. And I grew up wanting to be an aerospace engineer. So you can see a little bit of a thread of the mobility side of things, even at a very young age. And which I didn't realize. I didn't realize that the seeds of what I'm doing now was planted very early on, unknowingly, by my late father, who decided for me back then. And I know a lot of students can relate with this, right? Some of you here are studying to be an engineer because your father told you so, or your mother told you so. But that's okay. It's not necessarily a bad thing, because just bear with me here, listen to my story, and then you'll see. Sometimes my father planted in me the desire to be an aerospace engineer. And he says, that's what you should be. And I, studied really hard for it. I was a really bright kid in school. And so he said, you will be a great engineer because you're top of your class. And therefore, you should be in aerospace engineering, because in his mind, that's the most difficult form of engineering, right? To bring a man into space. And so that's what he did. But back then, even now, there aren't many aerospace engineering schools in Malaysia. And therefore, for you to gain a really strong degree in that field, you need to go to the US or go to Europe. So that was what I was aiming for, right? I wanted to come out of high school and then find my way into an American university. But then the 97-98 Asian financial crisis struck, and that meant that my late father had to change plans. He did not have the financial means anymore to send me there. It was an astronomical, exponential cost now, right? Times 5, times 6. And so he said, look, change your plans. Don't think you can go to the US anymore. And so if I can't go to the US, I can't be an aerospace engineer because I can't do that here, right? And so that was the first time that I had to do a pivot, and without really understanding what that meant. But it was a very personal pivot, right? Everything that I studied for, everything that I wanted to be, now had to change suddenly. Not out of my own doing, it was out of my control, right? The circumstances around me has changed. And so that was when I kind of went through a period of readjusting, recalibrating, took a year off to decide what to do next. And then I decided, okay, I resolved in my heart that I would not be an aerospace engineer anymore. I would be a computer engineer, a software engineer, because that was what I thought is what I could I could like doing, right? So I did that. I then got myself enrolled and shift courses here locally. Did a UK training program here, just so that I could save my father's money, because he has got younger kids to look after as well, my younger siblings. So I decided, great, I could do a good software engineering computing degree here, right? Why waste that? So that was what I did. Then I came out and basically started, finding my first job here. And I was fortunate enough back then, in the early 2000s, to land a job with a bioinformatics startup in Malaysia. There was the first bioinformatics startup in Malaysia, working with big data before the term was even coined, and working with 64-bit high-performance computing. And I cut my teeth as a programmer there. Really developing new applications for computational molecular biology, and I completely enjoyed it because I found myself in deep tech, in a completely area. It is, rather than sending the man into the moon, it's about what's in the man, right? It's a complete reversal. But I only saw that much years after, not while I was doing it. The context came much later in life. That once I looked back, I saw how all of this actually led to where I am now. And so I cut my teeth as a programmer, really, developing applications and really understanding a new domain, that is, DNA and genomics. And then I went through. So I stayed in my first job for about 4 years, grew in that. Until to the point where moved into systems engineering, learned everything that I could. I built our own data center and managed that. This was prior to the cloud days, back in 2003, 4, 5. Clouds do not exist yet. If you wrote an application and you wanted to host it, you've got to find a way to host it yourself. And so the data centers that we had back then, did not have 64-bit computing facilities. But we had 64-bit applications. So guess what? We had to build our own 64-bit data center. So I had to learn everything about power, cooling, dealing with vendors, really hardware systems engineering there. But I absolutely enjoyed it. I threw myself into my work. And then moved on after that to a few other industries, and finally landed in Shell IT in Cyberjaya, managing global storage operations. So I did that, and then came time when Shell IT was being outsourced, and I refused to be outsourced. And I realized, but back then, okay, this is the time for me to go out and build a business of my own. My father was an entrepreneur that came out in his midlife as well, and so I realized I've always actually wanted to do that, be my own boss and build my own business. And so I did that. Started running small businesses of my own, really being able to learn the ropes of building a business. Not really thinking about building a startup, but wanting to learn the ropes of business management and how and all the things that go into doing that. So I did that for a few years and just faithfully plowed along. And in those periods, when I first ventured into running my own business, a friend of mine back then in 2008, if you remember back then, the iPhone was first launched. And we started looking at this problem from a point of view of, okay, can we use these devices now? Because we saw this as being a game-changing move, where now you've got these computing devices in the hands of many people. And then we saw there were maps on these phones, right? But we realized that we didn't have real-time traffic information. And so one of our pet peeves back then was this whole traffic thing, right? We really thought, how can we use technology to help people navigate around traffic? And so, both of us started working on an idea. And then I used everything that I knew, basically using, genomics knowledge to be able to solve this whole problem about traffic, and applied that. And we managed to secure a pre-seed fund from MDEC back then to develop basically what Waze is doing now. And back then, we did not have Waze. We did not have real-time traffic information in Google Maps. So me and my friend said, look, let's do this. And we thought this, we really saw the value of, being able to use mobile devices to crowdsource traffic information. So we did that successfully. We had a working prototype. Very few people knew this, that before Waze came into Malaysia, we had a working prototype that a few of us were using that had very good traffic prediction levels. But then, of course, we had to scale it quickly, and we didn't know how to, right? We didn't know how to scale a new business and how to get new investments. That was like a very foreign thing to us back then. And if you know, back then as well, very few VCs, very few local VCs as well, not like what we have today. The wealth and the network that is around us in order to tap into VCs and to be able to gain access to experts like yourself, Dash, in terms of being able to advise local startups as to what next, how to navigate this. We were left on our own back then. It was the early days of the startup ecosystem in Malaysia. But then Waze came in, and then real-time traffic information became a common thing, and so basically Waze beat us to it. And so we thought, okay, great, it was a good experiment. Let's place it on the shelf. Let's move on from there. We didn't kick ourselves too much about it until Waze got acquired by Google for $1 billion, right? And that was when we decided, oh my God, that could have been us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But then we moved on. We moved on from there until 2018, when this whole desire to build something came about again. And I reconnected with Prem, and then out came Asia Mobility. So that, in a snapshot, was a bit of a background there.
Beautiful story, Ram. So many questions. I want to ask you. It seems to me that you actually have a very scientific mind. You have been ahead of the game. Even back then, to get these using mobile for traffic, and you said that you became an entrepreneur. Your dad was also an entrepreneur. Your father told you about go and become an aerospace engineer. And then you said to the audience that it's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, I'm just going to be provocative here. What about students who say, "Oh, I hate science"? I mean, lucky that your dad has observed that you like science, you're top of the class, asked you to do this. But, today, I mean, most of the young people are not very compliant. They say, hey, look, I've got a different passion. You want me to do law? I may want to do something else. I want to go and do coding, I want to do something else. So there is, what do you say to those kind of students? That's number one. And number two, was your dad being an entrepreneur, was that a kind of a motivating factor to be an entrepreneur? And what if parents are not entrepreneurs? Like my parents were not entrepreneurs. So when I wanted to be an entrepreneur, they said, it's not in our gene, which actually propelled me to investigate entrepreneurship as a career. So what about parents who are not entrepreneurs? They're just professionals. They say, oh my God, that's mistaking. Why do you want to do that? Just go and join. You're already a software engineer. You're already working somewhere. Why take the risk? Okay, so that's the second question. And the third question is, during all these times that you were working as a technologist, coming out and starting in 2008, you said how the idea itself conceptualized, the problem worth solving came into you. Why traffic? I mean, you were going to become an aerospace engineer. I would have thought you would have looked at the skies, but now you're suddenly looking at the earth and saying, hey, this is a congestion here, solving this. How did you come to that problem? Why did you decide to leave your job, your secure job, jump into this, get on with a pre-seed, throw yourself in all this uncertainty? So if you can, in a nutshell, tell us about these kind of things, then, it'll give us an idea of whether a student or an aspiring entrepreneur need to follow the parents necessarily, need to have passion or seed from early stage. Does the parents need to be an entrepreneur? Just take 2 minutes to quickly give us an overview of that.
Sure. Those are great questions. Let me try to answer those as best as I can. The first question about parents. Parents wanting you to be something which you may not necessarily agree with. I've got many friends who are in that same boat. um, I just so happened to be one of those who did not fight back, or did not find it to be a challenge to wanting to be what my father wanted me to be. But that's obviously not the case for everybody. But but what I meant by the fact that sometimes listening to what your parents wanting you to be would at least show you what is it that you don't want to be. So I think being able to have a clear mind, saying, okay, look, my father wants me to do this, but I tried it, it's not working out. It's just can't. I'm not geared for that. The faster you find out what you don't want to be is as good as knowing what you want to be, right? And so that is why I feel, from that point of view, I think it's very important to hear, to try, to give it a try, and then ultimately make up your mind. I had to make up my mind, saying, okay, look, I can't be an aerospace engineer. Right? There's just no possible way. I had to make that personal decision. My father did not make the decision for me, though, in order to give up the dream. But I had to make that decision in order for me to move on. Right? And so once I started taking ownership of my journey, then I can't blame my father anymore. I can't, I've got myself, to be held responsible. And so I think that's part and parcel of the journey, right? We are first placed on the journey by our parents, and then at some point you need to figure out and take ownership over your own journey.
Sure.
I hope that helps to explain that first question.
Beautiful. So they have to take ownership of their own journey, but consider what other options are, and also take into consideration what the elder people are saying. Okay.
Yes. The second part about what about parents who are not entrepreneurs? While my father was a midlife entrepreneur onwards, so it actually only dawned on me now, as you were saying it, Dash, that I realized that my father also entered, into that stage at his midlife, very similar to when I entered into business. I just only realized this now. While he was an entrepreneur until his dying days, but I only saw the challenges and the struggles of being one. I was not coached by him to be an entrepreneur. He never consciously did that, because I think, like what you have shared earlier, I think at the back of his mind, it's easier not to be one. Right? He was a struggling entrepreneur. At times he did really well, but at most of the times he really struggled and built a business. But he built a business that he was really proud of, and I was very proud of him for being able to be resolute, resilient, and really never giving up. Right? So that is one quality. If I were to take back one quality from him, is that I learned from my father through his difficulties and his challenges that he never ever gave up. He never made a U-turn. Right? He placed himself on that path and he went for it. He threw himself at it. And so I feel that is one trait of being an entrepreneur that I learned from my father. But every other tricks of the trade, or I had no coaching in every other area. I just watched him from a very personal point of view, but I never received entrepreneurial coaching from him. It just wasn't in his nature, I guess. And also I think he didn't want me to, or he didn't want to lead me down that path. He wanted me to figure it out myself. My mother wasn't an entrepreneur. My late mother was a stay-at-home mom. So very, very typical working class family. It's just that my father happens to have ventured into running his own business. And so I wasn't born with a silver spoon. Like, I did not inherit my father's business. I had to build everything from scratch. My father did not quite understand what I was doing. His mother didn't understand what I was doing. So I think if they were alive today, they would be very, very intrigued by all that I'm doing now, because they have never, they are not tech people, and they don't quite understand it. So in that sense, I don't think that there's much of an advantage that I could count for having a father who was an entrepreneur, except for the fact that it gave me very personal insights into the struggles. I actually learned how difficult it is to be one, and not all the glam and the glamour, and so I didn't see that with my father. So I was groomed to be a very on the ground business person. And that is why, and I think it shows through how I run my business now. It shows how lean we are. It shows how we even fundraise. We are very, on the ground, being able to prove ourselves first before we put ourselves out there. And I think it shows through that. Some may call it a weakness. I would like to use it to my strength, and so that's the background input from the parents.
Great sharing on that, Ram. Yeah, go on. And the third one, how did you come to this problem and said, this is what I'm going to spend the next X number of years solving and growing regionally and scaling, raising money? I know you're very, very busy with your raise this time. Why
Yes.
this problem? Yeah, and I know it's an obvious problem, but why this problem? How did that come about for you to say, okay, this is what is going to be my calling?
Yeah, I think it came about. The seeds were planted very personally for me in order for me to solve the problem for myself. So it's actually from a desire that I saw the problem and how it affected me, right? Number one, I grew up in a time when there were no ride-hailing services, pre-ride hailing. We all grew up, both of us grew up in such an era. And it's either you had to cycle to where you need to go, you walk to where you need to go, or if your parents had a car, they can drive you there.
Or you have to deal with arrogant taxi drivers who say, not going there. Traffic.
Yes. Put your hands in the life of a taxi driver he will decide where you go.
Exactly.
And as well. Or you have the luxury of a bus service near you live. So I happen to grow up in Klang, right? For most of my growing up years. And where we lived, we had no public transport services nearby.
Sure.
There was no bus service. You had to walk a lot. You had to walk a bit to get to the nearest bus stop or the bus terminal. Even though we were quite nearby to the town center, right? This is the first mile, last mile gap that we still see now in our towns and cities today, right? It is not far enough, but yet too far for you to walk. But yet there's no public transport services, and so my parents had cars, obviously, and they had to drive us around a lot. But at times we had conflicting schedules. I had to be somewhere, my brother had to be somewhere, my sister had to be somewhere, my mother had to be somewhere, and we had one car for my mom to use. And so this is that growing up years where we were all like teenagers, and we all had stuff to do now, right? We had friends to see, and so then I started cycling, and we had a few friends who just cycle around a lot, and that was good from a social point of view. But we couldn't cycle to school; it's just too far off. So then I realized, it actually affected how I moved about. It really had an influence as to how I lived my life as, growing up 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old in Klang. Where I lived in Klang had a huge impact on what my day-to-day life is like, right? And then came to a point when I had to move around and figure things out. When you're 16 years old, you are trying to represent the school. You get to a debating competition in another school. And the challenge back then is, how do we get there, right? And so I was fortunate enough that I could rely on my mom to help to carpool me and my friends. But there are times when after that, and then we had no smartphones, right? And so once you get there to this school somewhere, and then you're like, okay, how do I figure out how to get back here, right? So then you got to hop on a bus, and the bus will take an hour ride, and trying to figure out the transfers, no information, no data, nothing, right? So I grew up in such an environment. And then when I started working here in KL, I had my own car. But that really didn't solve the problem as well, because I found myself stuck in traffic for 2-3 hours a day, right? Trying to get to and from work, living in Klang and working in KL. You figure out the traffic there, right? The traffic jams were horrendous. And we still have the problem today. If you're driving from Klang to KL on a daily basis, pick whichever highway, you're stuck in a traffic jam, right? So the highways aren't solving the problems. There were new highways being built when I started working, and I used to think, okay, the new Pantai Expressway, the NP is going to solve the problem. No, The moment it was built, I got stuck in new traffic jams, right?
Yeah.
So that was a source of frustration that now my social life as a young, 25-year-old was all at work, because the moment I came out of the office, I was stuck in traffic jam. It took me an hour and a half to get back home, right? And so I realized, look, this problem is now never going away. I had a very similar problem growing up, and now with my own car, it's a new problem, and it was not sustainable.
Yeah.
And so that was when I felt a need, if I were to do something on the tech side of things, I wanted to solve this problem, right? I wanted to solve this problem for me. Can I work out something, build something that will at least help plan my journey, right? And so that was how we kind of like landed on the problem. It's actually from a very selfish point of view, can we build something that will solve our problem and help to improve our lives, right? But then use that so that we can help the rest around us and help our families, help our friends, and help our community and our cities.
Yeah, thanks, Ram. The reason I asked the question, and thanks for going so deeply into how a personal frustration brought about the motivation to identify a real problem to solve. And I think that's how successful startups are born. When the entrepreneur does not have a deep insight or intimate knowledge of a problem worth solving, I think they get frustrated with the first obstacle or second obstacle that comes along. But because this problem has stayed with you and you have really have a understanding and in and out and experience and deep frustration of the problem that has affected you. I mean, you can actually scale that thought that there are many people around Southeast Asia who are suffering from, Bangkok is, has a lot of traffic, Indonesia, and all that kind of stuff. So tell us a little bit about, about Asian mobility and how it solves this problem, and tell us about your current fundraise, if you can, in 5 minutes, because we will be taking questions from the students as well, if that's okay. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
Tell us in detail. Yeah.
So we are a mobility tech startup, and when we founded the business in 2018, me and Prem, this term, mobility tech also was hardly.
And Prem is an experienced entrepreneur himself. Building in Malaysia Kini and all that. Yes.
Correct. So Prem is the founder of Malaysia Kini. He's the co-founder of Malaysia Kini, and he's still running that business there. But his other passion is public transportation, and that was where we connected. So when we started the business, we realized one of the first aims that we wanted to do. So what framed the business at the start, or the birthing of the business, was the fact that we realized that our bus systems in Malaysia is in need of a major digital disruption, right? Whereby the data for just where is my bus, just answering that question, where is my bus, right? Okay. So we just wanted to answer that question, where is my bus? And so then we realized, okay, there are many kinds of buses, and there's a bus in Taiping, there's a bus in KL, and it's run by different operators, right? There's stage bus, there are the express buses, the school buses, for example, factory buses. And
I know minibus by the time we came out 2018, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We have retired the buses. Yeah.
Yeah. They were menaces in the roads.
Yeah. So then we realized, okay, we basically wanted to use technology and data to solve this problem, not run a new bus service. We wanted to build the technology, to provide the technology to bus operators so that they can bring their service into the 21st century using digital tools. And so what we did was to build a mobility platform, and that is what we have done. We have built a mobility platform that helps to generate this data, track your buses using IoT and telematics. So part of that platform is an IoT for mobility component, right? So we have devised and engineered our own IoT devices that is used for telematics, that sits on these public transit vehicles. Because if you want to solve the problem of data, and the problem is that the data is just not there, right? Or the data is not there in a way that is useful for passengers, right? Therefore, you need to get to the source of the problem, the data generation problem. How can we actually use telematics devices, use sensor-driven devices to actually extract and generate this data, right? Rich set of data, in order for us to then surface it process it so that we can then bring it to a client-facing interface. That's a platform. I'm connecting now the vehicle and the passenger. Right? So we have built that platform that has got an IoT component into it. There's got transit feed components in there so that the data from IoT devices, especially for public transit vehicles, can be easily processed and published in transit feeds. So the idea is that now these transit feeds then will appear in many journey planners, right? So we provide the technology to do that for transport service providers so that the transportation operators don't have to worry about tech. They need to worry about running efficient, professional transport services, manage your vehicles better and manage your drivers better, leave the technology to the platform, leave the technology to us, right? So you can see, so you can look at us almost like a platform, like a search engine, but a search engine for mobility. So that's what we've built.
Right. How does it look like? Let's say if I want to go from here to Selayang or to Klang or whatever, how does it look like to a user? And how does it look like to a bus driver? And how does it actually look like to a layman who doesn't know what IoT means, doesn't know what platform means, doesn't know data? What does it look like? Because in Asia, you say regional Southeast Asia, they say that in the US, this Professor Tarun Khanna has written a beautiful book saying that in developing countries, the entrepreneur only has to solve a problem, but in developing countries, in advanced economies, an entrepreneur only has to solve a problem. But in developing countries, the entrepreneur not only have to create, but he also have to create the conditions to create. Because there are so many gaps in the ecosystem, right?
Absolutely.
So tell me, and then you're saying, IoT, it all runs on internet. So many places in rural areas that no internet, and whether you go to rural Malaysia, rural Thailand, rural Indonesia, or Borneo, or wherever it is. So just tell us in layman's term, how does it look like for the user and the service provider, which is the bus company?
Yes. That is I 100% would agree with that statement, that in a developing country, an entrepreneur needs to create an ecosystem. You can't just solve a problem.
That's
right. So basically, the aim of the passenger, and so there are different use cases here. One is an urban passenger, and one is a rural passenger. So let's focus first on an urban passenger before we get to the rural side, and that is where you see the uptake is going to be anyway first, right? So an urban passenger would want to be able to either whip up an app, a commonly used app, right? Let's say a super app of some sort, or an e-wallet app, and in that app there is a
so give me an example of an e-wallet app for the audience so that they can say, okay, what would it be?
Let's say you take your touch and go app. It's an e-wallet app.
Fine.
It allows you to make payments, but also allows you to buy stuff, right? That buying stuff should translate to buying, mobility services. To book a ride. I want to be able to get from point A to point B. What are the modes of transport available? So we provide the technologies for that, the APIs for that in the back end, right? So
that means I can buy a bus ticket.
You can buy a bus ticket. You can plan a journey first. Before you can buy a bus ticket, you must be able to know which bus would serve you.
Right? So how many buses will take me to Selayang, let's say? I don't know why I picked Selayang, but for discussion purposes.
Yes.
Okay. I've not been to Selayang in ages, so let's say I want to go to Selayang.
Correct.
So let's say there are three connecting buses or whatever number of buses to go. Yeah. So I plan my journey using that, and then in planning my journey, I need to know what time the buses arrive.
Yes. That's right.
And then I buy my tickets on those things.
Correct.
Right.
So there is the journey planning component, which is a search engine, right? You asked the question, answer. So that's why I use that search engine sort of an analogy here. So we have built a journey planner that is optimized for Kuala Lumpur. Multimodal, which means not just buses here. Multimodal means point A to point B. You tell me all the available options for me.
We have
built the engine. The value is actually in the engine, because once you've built the engine, then you can ingest any kinds of data, any kinds of transport service provider, right? Sure. So to help people plan their journeys better, And so then once you plan that to help you then get a ticket, book a ride, right? So that you don't have to figure out actually who is the operator of that bus that runs from here to Selayar. Is it Rapid KL or is it Selangor Omnibus? There's actually a few different operators. If you take buses in KL, you would actually realize that it's not a single operator model, right? And so it's very much catered towards the ecosystem in Malaysia. And also very similarly in Southeast Asia, you have a very similar model. A lot of the major cities are not run by a single operator. There are many operators that run many kinds of buses, rails, e-scooters, ride-hailing. So it's multimodal in that sense. So from a passenger point of view, I don't have 5, 6, 7 different ways in order to book a ride. If I'm here, if I want ride hailing, it's this app. If I'm there, if I want a bus, it's another app, and it's not talking to each other. And when in fact I need it to be multimodal because I'm going to transfer from a bus to a ride hailing, right? And so we build the technology behind that so that from a passenger point of view, we make it simple, seamless, as easy as possible. In fact, we are basically looking beyond apps now already. Chatbot experiences, right? It must be as simple chatting with somebody in order to find out where is my bus, how do I buy a ticket.
So is it like in London, when I want to travel from the train to the bus to the whatever, I just buy this thing called the Oyster card, and I use it everywhere. So is it a single ticket that works for everyone? We actually welcome questions from the audience anytime. So please carry on and ask us. We have another. Okay, there's a question already. What is the biggest challenge you face in your startup journey? Okay, I think let's take the audience question.
Great, that is a great question. The biggest challenge?
From Anusha Sudhendiran.
This is a very time-based challenge, right? If you were to ask me when I first started the company, that's a different challenge. The challenge right now, the biggest challenge for me right now is obviously like any growing startup, fundraising, right? Fundraising is the biggest challenge, where we are at a stage where we are fundraising right now, our pre-Series A round. So we have already raised 2 rounds prior to this. This is our 3rd raise. With each raise, it gets a bit harder, and I'm sure y'all have heard that and y'all are quite aware of that. But I think the biggest challenge now for me personally is in this environment of a pandemic and raising money, and in Malaysia, right? It's a few factors there that makes it extra challenging. Yeah.
Why are you just raising in Malaysia? If it's a regional startup, it's going to be a regional startup. Didn't you have interest from other countries as well? Say from India, absolutely. For example, or Indonesia as well. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. We have got investors from the region. That have got interest, to invest in us, but they see us as a Malaysian startup operating in Malaysia. That actually lends to part of the complexity because a lot of VCs and investors are, they have to look at the political and the social economic climates of the country. Being in right now is a challenging place to be, but it's not an impossible place to be. Right, we have got a lot of interest from investors regionally because they take a long-term view, right? And they know that, and we have basically started on this in 2018. We did not just rise up today, right? We've moved at the right time, at the right place, I think, and we've been around long enough, relatively, to show that we are here to stay.
Right. Have you at any point in time felt like giving up? If you have, how did you lift yourself up from that point?
An entrepreneur will face this almost on a daily basis. If I were to be frank with you, we are not men of steel that don't get affected by what's going on around us. That is one of the biggest personal growth that I've experienced as an entrepreneur, is that my team depends on me not to give up, right? There are times, and we are all very much humans that are very much affected and influenced by what is going on around us, and more often than not, the CEOs is the one who gets punched up and kicked up around a lot more than anybody else in the company. It's just that you don't see that, right? and so every day presents an opportunity to give up. How do I get around that? How do I navigate that? How do I manage that? I think my family is a good foundation that I go to. My wife is a strong support, and the context that my kids give me, right? And so is a very healthy context for me. But if you're a single person and you're thinking, okay, now where is a single person going to go? I think it comes down to the community that you've built around you. You need to have friends around you who understand where you are and understand your journey. It'll be great to surround yourself also with fellow entrepreneurs. So I've got great friends who have been with me along the journey. In fact, one of my closest friends from high school is a good friend. Is a good friend now, and I bring him on that journey. He's part and parcel of my journey. He knows where I'm at. He knows what are the challenges that I'm facing. So the community that you surround yourself with is a helpful one, because it's can be a very lonely journey, right? If it's just yourself, and so that I find is a great source of help for me.
So another question is: the data pre-processing for the BI dashboard of your company's platform automated by AI tech, or is it done by analysts and data scientists?
That's a very good technical question. We have built a platform that is AI driven, but a lot of it has to be. There are some things that can be automated, obviously, from an IoT telematics point of view. There's a lot of an intelligence there already, but AI comes into play from a point of view of optimizing the network, right, for us. So the mobility network does not exist by itself. We need to feed the data in. The feeding of the data is obviously a manual process, because, as you know, transportation services are hyper-local systems, right? Just because you've got a bus running in Singapore doesn't mean that same bus is running on the same route in KL, right? So these are very curated data. So the data firstly have got to be curated, and then you've got to then ingest it. And once you've done that, then it gives us the opportunity to optimize that. And that optimization comes from usage. And so the AI comes at a more higher level for us as part of that mobility platform. First, it's an automation thing first before we get to the optimization. But it's definitely there. We have built the platform that it's ready with machine learning capabilities.
So Ram, before how would you resolve the challenge where different operator, where they use a different platform of payment, or perhaps resistance of change?
Yeah.
So they may not want to migrate to another platform, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So payment systems are part and parcel of what needs to happen for seamless travel, right? So that's part of the mobility as a service component of the platform. So mobility as a service is where you pay using a single mode of with a chosen mode of payment all the way, right? So you don't have to shift modes of payment. So from point A to point B, if I'm going to shift, say, from a ride-hailing service to a bus and then to an e-scooter, I can tie it all to a single mode of payment for me. So it's done on the back end, like an e-wallet, for example. And that is where we see a convergence of needs here and a convergence of requirements, right? The operators thus far, and so that is why the pandemic has actually accelerated the adoption of digital technologies in the public transit space. What was a nice to have now is a must have. And so I give you an example. For example, they are all talking about contactless, touchless, cashless, and ticketless ways of payment, right? Because public transit systems are not going to go away. The riderships will come back, but the riderships will come back once you've got safer ways for people to board, safer ways for people to book, and safer ways for people to travel, right? The riderships will come back, but it will come back on the back of a digital digital revolution, and a lot of that goes into the payment space. And so the operators, and so the whole idea of a platform is that the moment you get onboarded onto a platform, the operator receives the benefit of seamless payment integration, right? And so this is seen even now. The more options you give for people to pay, the better it is for the merchant, right? So even you go to a Pasar Malam kiosk now, they've got QR code, and you can pay it using any forms of e-wallets, for example. That's similar. It's a very similar transformation that will take place, that is taking place already in many parts of the world, where the public transit systems are more ready, and it will take place here. And so what we have done is to be able to understand the ecosystems here, using, for example, the fact that a lot of people use Touch and Go to travel on public transit systems here in Malaysia. We are working with Touch and Go in order to ready a platform that by using a Touch and Go e-wallet, for example, you can link that to your card, and you can link that to any modes of transit. And so it is a Malaysian strategy. So payments have got to be a national strategy, right? And so if you are doing transit payments in Singapore, for example, you're not dealing with Touch and Go. You're dealing with a Singaporean payment system, for example. And so that is the approach we are basically taking and employing as far as payments are concerned.
Well, I see you have to onboard so many different partners, a real complex thing. Let's get to this. While developing your app or building your company, will worry that other companies might be working or coming up with similar apps faster than their company. How do you overcome the fear of competition, who may overtake you, some big players coming and leapfrogging ahead of you? Which is a great question.
Yes, very good question. And I have had a similar experience when I shared my story earlier about Waze overtaking us, right? So I have learned to live with that. Competition is always good. Just because you're first, it doesn't mean that you're the best. And just because you're the first one out of the gate doesn't mean that you will be there 10 years from now. And we have seen that countless times. Google isn't the first search engine. Facebook isn't the first, social media platform. Spotify isn't the first, music streaming platform. So being the first isn't necessarily the best. It's about being what is right. It is about finding the right fit for the market. We feel that, especially in the area of mobility, the more the merrier, right? Therefore, it's finding your space, finding what you're good at, finding your strength, right? And that is why, while we have got regional ambitions, and it's locked up in our name, Asia Mobility, obviously we've got Asia in mind, but our strength is in Malaysia right now, right? We are building upon our strength. Our strength is that we understand the Malaysian problems better than anybody else, better than any global public transit company like Moveit, for example, right? Let's take Moveit as a good example. They are a public transit app. They are the largest public transit app in the world, but they are not very much used here, right? Simply because they are a global company and they've got a global footprint, but they're not hyper local enough that many Malaysians are using it. Why? And that's the space that we would like to occupy. That is a gap that we can fill, right? And so rather than being driven by fear, I think we should be driven by the opportunities. There is no one size fit all, we believe, and we've seen that in many areas, even ride-hailing companies, right? There's one big guy, but there's many other ride-hailing service providers as well. So there's a space for all of us to compete in. I keep my eye out on competition to learn from them, but also to keep us sharp. The competition is there for a good reason, right? I would like to leverage the fact that my competition gives me some intel so that we stay sharp and we stay on the leading edge. As long as we do that and we remain relevant and cost competitive, there are some strengths that we can play to as a very local company before we embark. And that is why I am asked all the time, why don't we go regional quickly, right? I don't want to go regional until my base is secured, and my base is Malaysia right now.
Have you ever thought of OKU friendly system as well, using voice?
Absolutely. That's a great question. That is always part and parcel of the user experience that is required for transit, right? From a disability point of view, or from a different ability point of view, right? So voice is definitely there. it is something that we don't have to re-engineer, right? Using text to speech APIs, for example, it makes it very easy for us to be able to support passengers with those kinds of requirements. In fact, with on-demand transit systems as well, one of the big use cases of that is for passengers that require wheelchair support, for example. And so that is what I mean by hyperlocal, right? To guide an able-bodied person to walk down a road in order to catch a train, right? Versus a person who is on a wheelchair, right, actually needs hyperlocal information. You must be able to know, is there a wheelchair ramp in that terminal? Are there wheelchair-friendly facilities, right? Is there a footpath that is an actual footpath and not on the road, right? And so those things actually is what I meant by hyperlocal data, hyperlocal information that is required in order to make our journey planners accurate and reliable, right? And that is why a lot of you who are watching here, you've got Google Maps on your phone, but you never use Google Maps for walking directions, right? Very simple reason is because if you try it, more often than not, it is wrong for you and it's not the best way. You know a better shortcut in order to just cross there and it gets you there. Whereas if you were to try to do that on Google Maps, it follows driving directions when in fact you could just walk across. That's because Google Maps is made. It looks for pedestrian pathways, footpaths, which we don't in a lot of places in our cities. We don't have dedicated.
They don't have footpath. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, we don't. We just find a way in order to cross here, wait for that traffic light and cross at the traffic light, right? And so those kinds of things, for example, and there's a bridge, and that bridge is not on the map, right? There are some bridges that we use here that are built for walkways that is not on Google Maps, right? But we use those bridges on a daily basis. And so that is what I meant. Even in the choice of mapping technologies, right? We use maps, but we use the data from these maps, the ones that work best for KL, for example, right? We use that in order to give reasonable, logical, localized walking directions. And so that is what a global big app can't do immediately, right? You need local knowledge. And that is what I mean by, being present, firmly entrenched where we are so that we understand the complexities where we are before we build the systems to scale this.
So Ram, before there's more questions. We've got, I'll try, I'm going to stretch it to 7:50, guys. So another two or three more questions. 7:15, yeah? I know we said we'll set till 7:30, but we also know that during this pandemic, a lot of people don't want to sit in front of Zoom in a computer, so we are trying to manage time. What's your advice for young people who want to become entrepreneurs? What should we watch out for?
Just from my experience and from what I have experienced in my journey, if I can extract something out for a young person now who wants to become an entrepreneur, I think one of the biggest advice that I can give you is to not have your to make a stand and to go all in, right? Don't become a part-time entrepreneur.
You can't be half pregnant, as they say.
Yeah. So I have had a few well-meaning, bright, young, really good intentioned young people asking me the question about, okay, look, I am here now, I've got a good job, but I'm not really happy with it. But I've got this idea that I want to work on, and I'm partnering with somebody to do it. I'm not sure if I should do it. You are either in or out, right? And there's no right or wrong answer, right? It may not be the right time for you to start a business. That's okay, right? Don't feel the pressure that you need to go and start a business right now in order for you to be successful, right? The timing is a huge thing that you need to be aware of. You could be an entrepreneur in midlife, and you could be an entrepreneur at the age of 18. Right, one may fail, one may succeed, and it's got nothing to do with age. So don't feel the pressure of saying, okay, look, I need to sacrifice now in order for me to be successful. that is not a, there's not a formula, right? That is not part of the formula, all right? The most important thing is that if you are passionate enough, if you are purposeful enough, and if you're driven enough, right, and you're willing to sacrifice. The good thing about being young, as in young, being single and not married and not have a family that depends on you, is that you can more easily sacrifice, right? So take that as an advantage, right? So if you're going to jump then, right? A person who is, married, has got 3 kids and has got mouths to feed, and is going to think much longer, before that person jumps and says, okay, look, I'm going to build this. I'm going to put my savings into this, right? And so use the advantage of youth in order to take more risky sacrifices. But at the same time, don't feel the pressure that you need to give up something just in order to become an entrepreneur, right? Don't feel the pressure. If you feel the pressure, that means it's not time to jump, right? The fear should, reduce. The drive should increase, right? If you feel that you need to jump because of fear, then you're jumping for the wrong reason. You need to ensure that the fear is being managed, that you're not jumping because of fear, you're jumping because there is a drive in order to build a new business. You see an opportunity, you want to sink your teeth into it, and you feel that this is the right time, you want to try it out, you want to give your all, right? Then the drive is there, not the fear of missing out or the fear of losing out. If the drive is larger and the drive is pulling you towards it, then go for it.
Very nice. During pandemic, people are less likely to use public transport. How can you improve your business on this issue?
Yes. Like what I've shared earlier, the pandemic is not a permanent feature in our world. It seems to be like it's never ending, right? But we will move from this pandemic, and we will reset. And the world will reset, that sort of new normal, right? And so we will never always be in crisis mode. Now, obviously, Malaysia is in crisis mode, right? But we will not operate constantly in a pandemic mode. But what is certain for sure is that public transport systems are here to stay. And so the question is that we need to answer is that how can we make public transport systems more resilient to future pandemics, to future interruptions, to future disruptions, right? Take pandemic as a disruption to a public transportation network. We've got to treat it like that. In the same way, a crash is a disruption. We've had an LRT crash recently, right? That is a disruption, but that is a short, momentary disruption that caused a lot of damage, caused a lot of hurt to a lot of people. In the same way, the pandemic is causing a lot of hurt and a lot of damage to the system, but it's a more drawn-out disruption, right? But both are disruptions. And so in the same way, both of these, disruptions introduce new elements into the system and introduce new demands into the system. How can public transport systems be more flexible and dynamic in responding to such disruptions, right? And so that is where the business case is at, right? Where the platform is a data-driven platform. So no matter the disruption, right? If a train is late or if a train is overcrowded, which is a pandemic-related concern, right? I don't want to board a train that is overcrowded. How can I ensure that the journey planner that I've got, the journey planning technology, is able to predict overcrowding? We have the technologies today in order to do that, right? So that is what I mean by future-proofing our public transit systems. It's not about a new type of train. It's about the passenger experience. How much more data can we surface to you as the passenger so that you can make more informed decisions and more options can be surfaced for you. So for example, if a platform is overcrowded and it shows that same pattern on a daily basis, and if you are traveling at that point again, the system must be able to give you other alternate, safer modes of transport that is not so crowded, for example, right? That's an example, but that is what I mean by the technologies behind public transport. So we need to start thinking about not just trains or the hardware. There's a lot of software and data technologies that needs to be part and parcel of our public transport experience.
Ram, I've got good news for you. There's a lot of popular demand. They don't want me to stop at 7:15. They want me to stop as published time. You're on demand. So you got to be on a roll, man. So
Wow.
yeah, so I'm told to keep it until the time we agreed, 6 to 7:30. Is that okay with you, Ram?
Sure. No problem. I'll be more than happy.
Okay, Ram has been very kind. Have you ever felt the feeling of giving? Oh, integrated and changed the business aim. I think okay, there's a new person asking the question. I will let the questions go, and
Yeah, I think this whole idea about adapting the business as we go along, I think that is maybe at
part
the
of the
crux of it.
business.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Felt of the feeling of giving up, and then you want to integrate and change. That is part of being able to understand and to the
navigate the market.
to navigate the market. So you got to hear what the market wants, and that's a changing thing, an evolving thing.
Mhm.
And that is part of the role of the CEO, really, is that if you think that something isn't working out, and you went down a path, at some point you need to make a decision, a strategic decision, whether you keep going at it, or you have got enough input to justify a slight course correction, right? So the job of the CEO is actually to look for the signs, uh, and not just to make the decision. You got to make the decision based on knowing where to look at, knowing to look out for those signs. Let's use the fact that I'm traveling in a car, and I'm going, and then there's a stop. There's a stop sign, and I just bypass that. I'm just driving blind, and then there is a danger sign. I bypass that. The job of the CEO is not to bypass the signs. The job of the CEO is to look for the right signs as well, right? And then to make a decision while the team is going on a path. Do we make a left turn here so that we reap the most benefits out of what we've already invested in, and we don't make a U-turn. No one wants to make a U-turn, but there are times when you may need to make specific course correction that is big enough, right, in order to salvage your business, save your business. I've not had to make such decisions yet, thankfully, but there have always been small course corrections along the way, right? It is, the roadmap is never set in stone. Let me tell you that the roadmap and the business model even is never set in stone. You must be able to not treat those things as precious commodities, right? Your roadmap is meant to change. Your business model is meant to change as you go along, but the change needs to make sense. The change needs to be weighted in terms of the return on investment, right? So a whole bunch of factors and consideration that needs to be part of that decision making process. But that's part and parcel of leading a startup. I can tell you this, that my roadmap is a nimble roadmap, but there are stuff on my roadmap that we are working on now that I would not stop and alter midway. But there are stuff that is being planned for next that may suddenly disappear in the roadmap and get pushed down the line because there's something else that appears. So that is what that sort of flexibility is what every startup needs to have.
Yeah, I think there is a great saying, the business plan does not survive the first contact with the customer. So many entrepreneurs don't have business plans. They go and they shape things and forecast things only in a short time,
Correct.
There's Badrul Haikal Iman who says, as a well-known corporate leader, what motivates you to constantly improve yourself?
Oh, actually, y'all have all been very, very kind to me. I'm not a very well-known corporate leader. I'm just one of those who just trying to plow along and build something that hopefully can improve all of your lives. But what motivates me to constantly improve myself is talks like this, actually, and that is why I jump at the opportunity to do this and to take questions, because from the questions actually it forces me to think. Thinking for me happens after this call, where I recollect back and I revisit the questions and I revisit the answers, and so I'm a thinker in that sense, where a lot of my thinking happens after this, where I look back at some of the questions that were asked, because that is where I learn for myself, right? No, I should have answered in a better way, or I should have thought through that a bit more. And there are some things that any one of these things would leave behind for me. Every one of these talks, every one of these Q&A sessions, every one of these opportunities to engage with customers, to engage with investors, right? Each time I would take back something in order to say, okay, look, I need to look at that. So I'm actually hearing constantly. While I do find myself talking a lot as the CEO, right? But at the same time as well, the ears are constantly listening, and that is the best way to improve yourself. Really, is to constantly. So I am my biggest critic, in that sense, right? I'm always looking at ways that I could improve and do things better. And no, I should have thought of that. Each time something does not go the way I planned, it's me going into a retrospective mode first internally, right? No, I should have done this because I should have saw this, and so that is how I see myself as part of a self-improvement strategy. That inner voice in me, and all of us have that. It's the choice of how loud should your inner voice be. And I heard this being said by a well-known leader, and I'm just drawing from what I heard him say. How loud do you allow that inner voice to be? Is that a critiquing voice that shuts you down? Or is that a voice that you can measure the volume and you can tune the volume enough so that the volume is there just to tell you, hey, you may have messed up there a little bit, or you should have looked at that a bit more, right? The next time, right? So it's in managing the volume of that inner voice that helps me to improve myself. But that's just the voice that you hear. But more importantly, also the external voices, right? The feedback that you get from clients, the feedback that you get from your own staff and employees, the feedback that you get from your co-founder, from your shareholders, right? All of those feedback actually leads to a set of improvement action items, so to speak, so that I feel is more than enough as an input to improve oneself.
Great, Ram. Wow, there's non-stop, Ram. You are. Would you consider to work together with Grab to further expand the flexibility of public transport rather than just buses or train? Perhaps Grab car also in the option.
Yes, absolutely. Grab, we see Grab as a transport service provider. Just like you have, bus services and rail services and e-scooters, car sharing, ride-hailing is a huge part of a transportation network in a city. And so Grab, but we don't see Grab as the only one. Obviously, Grab is the largest player here, but there are many other local ride-hailing providers as well. And so we have designed and architected the system, the multimodal journey planner, that it is aware of how to handle ride-hailing data. And that means if it's Grab or if it's taxi or if it's any other provider, we see it as a mode of transport. The more options, the merrier. And so definitely I would jump at the chance to work at Grab. But obviously Grab is now not just a mobility service or a mobility. It's more than that. It's ride-hailing plus payments, food.
It's becoming a super app now.
It's a super app. But, being in this region, obviously, at some point we will intersect and interface with Grab or with Gojek or with both. The whole idea is that we are mode agnostic, right? So the platform needs to, platform is meant to level the playing field. That is one of the key value proposition of a platform. The platform isn't going to have biases towards Grab or taxi or My Taxi or any other local ride-hailing provider. The platform is going to see it as an option that is going to, benefit the passenger's query. And so that is how we, see that problem. But obviously, at some point, being in Asia, being where we are, there will be some points to work with Grab. In fact, we've already started on that already. And so we look forward to doing more.
How do you manage the different talents working in a company, different opinions, ideas? And how do you pick the so-called correct ideas to move the project forward?
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack there in one question. But I think
It looks like I need to give you a treat after this. Go out for a drink,
Yes.
Thank you.
As soon as the MCO is over and we can do
that. Yes.
I think as the leader of the business, I always seek to diversify the talent in the company. And I find that the more we do that, the easier it is for me to pick out good ideas versus bad ones, right? And so that is what I constantly do. I don't have a set expectation of a kind of a person or a talent that is accepted or will thrive in Asian mobility. The more diversified we are, the better. So I actually love the idea of being able to hear, different viewpoints, and the more the more levels of contribution in a meeting, or the more that the team is engaged verbally, right? Contributing ideas, be it verbal or also in written, right? I actually enjoy that. But at the same time, that also comes a volume that needs to be processed, right? And so that is where I put in place, or I have to put in place, structures where there is a place to review ideas, but there's a place where we need to also pick ideas, right? We need to select the right ideas. And so it's being able to build the platforms and the avenues and the strategies on a day-to-day basis, right? Where there's time for collaboration, but there's a time for a decision, right? And that is part of the challenge actually for a growing team like mine, and also where we've got hybrid working environments now, where there are times when I'm in the office, times when a whole bunch of people are working from home, and times when some of them are there, some of them are here. It's hard to actually execute this like clockwork, and therefore it's always very useful for me if I've got the different talents operating in their areas of strength, right? So that actually gives me a counterweight to each other, right? So if I hear somebody and I know where that person's strength is, so my job, actually, my first job is actually as a CEO is to be able to identify where the strengths lie in the team, right? So person A's strength is here, and person B's strength is here, and person C's strength is there, right? And to be able to then know that when you speak from your place of strength. We don't speak from our place of weakness. We all speak from our place of strength. And so when it's time to collaborate, all of them is going to speak from their place of strength. And so the danger is that in a team is that where everybody's strength is in the same place, then you hear the same voice, right? It's an echo chamber. And so that is why I bring in the diversity in the team. And that helps me to be able to filter out the ideas because I know where it's coming from. And that actually is a far better way in order for me to sieve out a good idea versus a bad idea. So I hope that helps to explain a little bit as to how at least I work and I function.
Yeah. So we have time for two more questions, and then we can conclude slowly. Yeah. How is Asian Mobility adapting to digital marketing?
We are still at the stage of scaling up the marketing side of things, right? So where we are, we have actually invested the last 2.5 years really building the technology, very much invested into the tech. So a little bit of marketing, just a smattering of digital marketing. We are very much a B2B company, and therefore our digital marketing strategies and efforts are going to be catered towards that segment, right? It's not a B2C kind of a marketing, but still it requires more thought actually. B2B marketing actually requires more thought, more planning, more being able to strategize more. And that is what I found. The digital marketing for a B2B or a B2B2C company like us, it is actually a lot more thinking needs to go into that. And so the stage that we are in right now is that we will be ramping up our marketing efforts and activities there. We have learned that not all digital marketing is necessarily an effort that is worth spending in, and we feel that it's not a question of adapting, it's a question of employing the right tools, the right platforms, the right channels, and every company needs to make its selection. So we are making our selection already, and then we'll hire in the talent in order to execute all of those plans.
Great, Ram. as an entrepreneur and successful businessman, what business structure or tips would you give for future business or women entrepreneurs? Okay, enough questions after this.
Business structure or tips, future businessmen. There's a lot here. It's a very open-ended question. But I think let's maybe talk about structure. I think there's one. It's just, I think it's a very pertinent one. In terms of structuring how you operate where, it's important that you realize that we are all called to do many things. You'll be a father, you'll be a husband, you will be a son, you will be a CEO, you will be a friend, you will be, we all called to carry many roles at one point of time. And the same goes for businesses as well. That at any point of time you may be called to do a few things, right? But it's always important to know that you can only be the driver of one vehicle. You can't be the driver of two vehicles at the same time. You can only be a driver of one vehicle. You can be a passenger in the other vehicle. You can be the owner of another vehicle, right? Or you could be the guy who helps keep the fourth vehicle running, right? And that is what I mean by either being the CEO, the shareholder, the partner, or a non-executive role, right? You can't run two businesses at the same time as a CEO. If I can give one piece of advice from a structure point of view, it's that, right? You should be the CEO of one business, but you can be a director in another business. You can be a shareholder in another business. You can do that. That's not a problem, right? But you can only steer one ship at a time. You can't steer two ships at a time, right? Because if you do that, then both the ships will have a half-time driver. Okay, so that's a very, very simple structure point of view. But I find that more and more, and this may not be with the young people though, but maybe the older ones maybe who think that they can be the CEO of multiple companies. Actually, you can't. You'll be a part-time CEO or you'll be a quarter CEO, right? But you can definitely do many things, right? Don't restrict yourself that if I am the CEO of this business, I've got the opportunity to actually be a part of something else, but it's a different role, right? Don't try to replicate the roles, but you can definitely contribute towards many other things that is going on. You can serve on other boards, right? And I feel the richness and the diversity of you being able to serve in other things apart from just serving your business, it actually is very helpful for your business. I give you an example. I was just appointed to be the tech advisory panel of an international school, right? I'm not the CEO there. I'm not running the school, right? I don't have a day-to-day role there, but I've got an advisory panel role there, and I find that to be a very useful outlet for me as the CEO. It's also a very useful place to give me context, right, as to everything that we are building from a talent point of view, right? Now it gives me context as to, hey, what is our talent pipeline in Asia Mobility that is going to help find new talents in years to come, right? And so, doing stuff like that seems like a distraction. Actually, it's not. As long as you ensure that you don't replicate the same roles everywhere, right? The moment you do that, then it becomes a distraction to you.
Thank you so much, Ram. We have got 2 more minutes. We'd like to wrap up and end on time. Thank you so much for your sharing. We've had it's been a great almost 90 minutes now, and it's great to have you. One thing, Ram, that I've always admired you're very busy. You've got a busy family. You've got children and all that, and also you're an entrepreneur and you take on so many roles. But one thing that comes on very consistently with you show a lot of care. You spend time with friends. You show a lot of care. You've come and talked here and you put your heart and soul into this. This has been very consistently something that I've noticed about you, and also prior to this, we have had a lot of other entrepreneurs who have come and spoken, and they all have shown care about giving back, So this is a great role that you have talked about, and you talked about something very interesting about the inner voice. just take 30 seconds to tell us about where does this care come from and talk about the inner voice, and then we will wrap it up. And you said that, you're a tech advisor to another international school. APU may be considering you to be an advisor as well. We will like to have you, come on board. But do tell us a little bit about the care that you come to, as an entrepreneur. You care for your people too, I hear, a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Desh. You are very kind with your words and what you have seen and noticed and observed. I think the care comes from definitely me being a father. That there is a natural care for the younger people. I think naturally it comes, but also from a place of faith and of the spiritual journey that I have chosen. My faith really, I think, informs a lot about the value of people. So I'm a Christian, and I'm and I try to grow as a Christian, and in fact I was a pastor once, right? So I was an entrepreneur who became a pastor, who then became an entrepreneur again. So I understand the difference between the sacred and the secular. There is actually no difference. It is, we are all serving. We are all called to serve, right? Therefore, I think it comes from there, from that place of faith and what faith has taught me, the values of my faith, the value of people, and so. While the technology is great, my biggest asset are the people in my team. I will say that with no hesitation. You can't put a price on them. You can value my business. You cannot put a price or a valuation on my people. So I think it comes from there, and that is where it helps to inform me and educate me as well.
So Ram, it's 7:31. One last thing. You only have 30 seconds to answer this. This is a question that people have asked before. It's not my original question. If there was a billboard, that highway, people go past the highway, and you have a space on the billboard, if there is one thing that you want to save so everybody can look at it, what would it be?
Oh my God. You have placed me literally on the spot there. Oh dear, my face is on the billboard, and there needs to be something.
No, something you want to say in the billboard, where thousands of people are driving by and they're looking at it. You're in Mobiliti, so you may want to send a message. Yes.
Okay, so doesn't need to be about me, right?
Not about you. What advice would you give? What do you want to tell the world?
Okay, great. One billboard. Okay. What do I tell the world? I say, okay, since the billboard is going to be in Malaysia, I got one billboard. The billboard is in Malaysia. I would say, Malaysia never give up hope.
Absolutely great. Thank you very much, Ram. Thanks for joining us at Enterprise Wednesday at Asia Pacific University. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Love to your family, and thank you very much to the audience who stayed on and asked questions. See you guys soon. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And the QR code, for those of you who have attended, please scan your phone, get the QR code if you want to get your attendance certificates. And that's good. Great. Ram, have a great dinner with your family.
You too, Dash. You take care. I'll see you soon.
See you soon. Cheers.